So we'll close out our module on the blood vessels by exploring some homeostatic imbalances of blood volume and fluid volume. The first that we will examine is edema, which is an increase in the concentration of fluid in the tissues as a result of low blood plasma proteins. Fluids will tend to accumulate in the tissues and cause swelling. So recall that the most important plasma protein for creating osmotic pull of this fluid into the blood is albumin. So if plasma albumin levels are too low, then that will cause tissue edema and fluid to accumulate in tissues outside of the bloodstream. Another imbalance that we'll examine is called hypovolemic shock, and it results when blood volume is too low. It has several causes. Usually results from conditions that cause massive fluid or massive blood loss, such as hemorrhaging, vomiting, diarrhea, which causes excessive water loss, as well as burns, because burned tissues will tend to leak fluids. So hypovolemia results in a decreased venous return, which would also decrease preload and cardiac output as a result. The vasomotor center of the brain would respond by stimulating the smooth muscle of the muscular arteries and the arterioles to contract, which is going to decrease the diameter of those vessels and increase the resistance, which is going to cause blood pressure to increase and hopefully return to normal. So we also see that baroreceptors would detect these decreased blood volume levels because they would detect less stretch in the aorta and the carotid arteries, and in doing so they would activate the cardioacceleratory and vasomotor responses. So recall that the cardioacceleratory center would then increase heart rate and force of contraction to help keep cardiac output consistent, and the vasomotor centers would respond by causing vasoconstriction, which would increase the blood vessel resistance and increase blood pressure as a result of that. Additionally, we would also see that the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism would be activated to decrease urine output, which would help increase and retain blood volume. And we also see that the hypothalamus would prompt the release of antidiuretic hormone, which is called ADH in this diagram, which would cause the kidney to retain water and also increase blood volume as well. The last one that we'll examine is vascular shock. And vascular shock occurs due to a massive drop in blood pressure as well, similar to hypovolemic shock, but it is not caused by a loss of blood volume or fluid volume. Instead, it is caused by excessive blood vessel dilation. Three main causes are anaphylaxis, sepsis, and nervous system failure. So anaphylaxis, which is a major systemic allergic reaction, occurs when histamine, which is a potent vasodilator, is released all over the body, causing a massive inflammatory response due to certain chemicals or certain stimulants, which we'll look at in a second. Sepsis, which is due to bacterial infections, are also a cause of vascular shock because we see that bacterial toxins are really potent vasodilators. And as we just saw, if the central nervous system fails, we saw that that causes the brain to lose control over the rest of the body because the things like the cardioacceleratory center, the cardioinhibitory center, or the vasomotor center cannot effectively communicate with those parts of the body. Major signs of vascular shock are hypotension as well as tachycardia. So let's examine anaphylaxis for a second. So anaphylactic reactions can be caused by things like insect stings, reactions to medication, or even certain food allergies. These reactions then cause a massive drop in blood pressure because the immune system, as we just saw, releases a chemical called histamine, which is a potent vasodilator, and that vasodilator initiates inflammatory responses to the cause of the reaction. This response then creates a huge drop in blood pressure that results in things like tachycardia, because as heart rate, as we just saw, would increase in order to keep cardiac output at sufficient levels, as well as maintain blood pressure.